You clumsy girl, look what you've done to my kitchen. This is unacceptable.
Welcome, friends. The morning sun slipped quietly through the cracked kitchen window, lighting up a room that had seen too many tears. The young maid, barely in her 20s, stood near the old wooden counter. Her hands shook as she stirred the curry, trying her best to make it perfect, hoping that maybe today her master would say something kind. But fate had other plans. As she reached for a plate to serve, her tired fingers slipped. The plate fell, crash, shattering into 100 pieces on the cold floor. For a second, silence filled the room. Then came the roar. Her master spun around, his face red with anger, eyes burning like fire. "What have you done?" he yelled, his voice echoing through the small house. "Do you think money grows on trees? You useless girl." The maid froze. Her eyes widened, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear his words. Tears began to fall silently, one after another, as she whispered, "I'm sorry, sir. It was an accident." But her apology only fueled his rage. He slammed his hand on the counter. "Accident? That's all you ever say. You're nothing but a burden." Her shoulders shook. She bent down to pick up the broken pieces, her trembling hands bleeding as sharp edges cut her skin. Still, she gathered them carefully, lovingly, as if she were trying to piece together her shattered dignity. In that moment, memories flooded her mind, her little brother waiting for her at home, her mother's fading smile, and the promise she made to herself, "I'll work hard, I'll make things better." But now, even that promise felt broken. Her tears fell onto the floor, mixing with the shards, shining like tiny stars in the dust. The master turned away, muttering angrily, leaving her alone in silence. The only sound that remained was the quiet, sobbing of a girl who had done nothing wrong, except being poor. As she slowly cleaned the floor, she whispered, "I didn't mean to break the plate, but I think something inside me broke too." The camera zooms out, a dim kitchen, a broken plate, and a young woman kneeling on the floor, surrounded by pieces of her pain. Outside, the sunlight touched her face softly, as if heaven itself was trying to comfort her. Sometimes people see the broken plate, but never the broken heart behind it. Like, comment, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories on Soul of Kindness. The scene opens in a small, dimly lit kitchen. The soft clinking of dishes fills the air, and a young maid moves quickly, her worn-out hands working tirelessly to prepare the evening meal. Her clothes are simple, her eyes tired, yet there's a quiet hope in them. She hums a little tune, thinking about her sick mother at home and how this job keeps the medicines coming. Then it happens. A small slip. The plate slips from her trembling hands. Crash! The sound echoes like thunder in the tiny room. Porcelain pieces scatter across the floor. Her heart stops. She stands frozen, eyes wide with fear. The door bursts open. Her master, a well-dressed man with cold eyes, storms in. "What have you done?" he shouts, his voice shaking the walls. "Do you know how expensive that was? You clumsy girl. You ruin everything." Tears fill her eyes instantly. "I'm sorry, sir." "Please, it was an accident," she whispers, her voice trembling like a frightened child. But he doesn't listen. He keeps shouting, his words sharp like knives, cutting deeper than any wound. "You think sorry fixes everything? You're lucky I even let you work here." She lowers her head, her hands shaking as she kneels down. Carefully, she begins to pick up the broken pieces one by one. Each shard cuts her fingers, but she doesn't stop. The blood mixes with her tears on the floor. "I didn't mean to," she murmurs softly. "I just wanted to make everything perfect." The man turns away, disgusted. The sound of his footsteps fades, leaving her alone with the silence and her pain. She looks at the broken pieces in her palm and whispers, "They say plates break easily, but no one talks about how hearts break the same way." The camera slowly moves closer. Her tear-streaked face glows under the weak light, her eyes filled with both pain and strength. Outside, the wind blows softly, carrying away her silent sobs. Sometimes, it's not the plate that breaks, it's the spirit that goes unheard. As the screen fades to black, gentle music begins to play. Please watch this video till the end, because sometimes the smallest stories carry the deepest pain. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. a channel soul of kindness. The night had fallen quietly over the city, but inside that small house, silence wasn't peace, it was pain. The young maid sat on the cold kitchen floor, her hands still bleeding from the broken plate she had tried so hard to clean. The room was empty now, except for the sound of her soft sobs echoing against the walls. She looked at her reflection in the shiny metal pot beside her, red eyes, trembling lips, and a heart full of sorrow. "Why am I never good enough?" she whispered to herself, her voice breaking with every word. Her mind went back to her mother's words the day she left home. "No matter how hard life gets, my daughter, keep your heart pure. The world may hurt you, but don't let it change who you are." A tear rolled down her cheek as she remembered those words. She had promised her mother she'd stay strong. But tonight that promise felt too heavy. She looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. She hadn't eaten anything since morning. Still, she gathered herself and began cleaning the kitchen again, slowly and silently. Every corner she wiped felt like she was cleaning away her own pain. Then suddenly, she heard a soft voice behind her. It was the master's little daughter, a sweet girl no older than 6. She stood there holding a small bowl of rice. "Auntie, you didn't eat dinner. Papa shouted at you, right? Don't cry. I saved this for you." The maid froze. Her lips trembled, eyes filling again with tears, not of pain this time, but of love. She knelt down and hugged the little girl tightly. "You're an angel," she whispered. "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." The child smiled and touched her face gently. "Mama says God sees everything. Maybe he'll see how good you are too." The maid couldn't speak. Her tears flowed freely now, warm, unstoppable. In that tiny moment, the harshness of the world softened. The kindness of a child became the light that touched her shattered soul. She smiled faintly through her tears and said, maybe God does see. Maybe one day life will stop breaking me." The camera slowly zooms out. A tired maid and a little girl sitting together on the kitchen floor, sharing a small bowl of rice surrounded by broken pieces. But this time her heart wasn't broken, it was healing. Because sometimes it takes just one small act of kindness to fix what the world has destroyed. The next morning arrived. Soft sunlight filtered through the dusty kitchen window. The air was still heavy from the night before, but inside the maid's heart, a small spark of warmth had returned, thanks to the little girl's kindness. She woke up early, quietly swept the floor and began cooking breakfast. Her hands still bore tiny cuts from the broken plate, but she ignored the pain. Every stir of the spoon, every breath she took, was a silent prayer for patience, for peace, for a better tomorrow. As she placed the breakfast on the table, she heard footsteps. Her master walked in, his face still stern but not as cold as before. The little girl followed him, holding his hand tightly. "Papa," she said softly, "you were very mean to her yesterday." She cried so much. "You should say sorry." The man froze. He looked down at his daughter, her innocent eyes staring right into his soul. For a moment he didn't know what to say. He glanced toward the maid, who stood quietly by the stove, eyes lowered, trying to stay invisible. The silence stretched long. Finally, he sighed deeply and said in a low voice, "I lost my temper yesterday. I shouldn't have shouted. I'm sorry." The maid looked up, surprised. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She had never heard those words from him, not once. "It's all right, sir," she said softly. "I should have been more careful." But the little girl interrupted, shaking her head. "No, you didn't do anything bad. Plates can be fixed, hearts can't." Her innocent words filled the room with something powerful. Truth. Even the master lowered his eyes in shame. He walked closer and said quietly, "You've been working here for years. I've seen how hard you try. I forget sometimes that you're human too." The maid felt a lump rise in her throat. She smiled faintly, tears forming again, not of pain this time, but of relief. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "That means more than you know." The little girl smiled proudly, wrapping her arms around the maid's leg. "See, Auntie? I told you God sees everything." The maid knelt down and hugged her tightly, her tears falling onto the child's small shoulders. For the first time in years, her heart felt light. The pain hadn't disappeared. but it had softened, replaced by something she hadn't felt in a long time: dignity. She looked up toward the window, the sunlight shining on her face like a blessing. In that light she saw something beautiful: forgiveness. And because sometimes even one kind word can mend what anger destroyed. The camera slowly zooms out. The maid serving breakfast, the little girl laughing, and the once angry master watching quietly, lost in thought. The same kitchen that had witnessed pain now held peace. Welcome, friends. Days passed, and the house began to feel different. The air that once carried shouting and fear now held something softer: respect. The maid still worked hard, her hands rough and tired, but her heart had begun to heal. Every morning, she smiled at the little girl who had unknowingly become her angel of hope. But life, as always, has its own plans. One afternoon, while cleaning the veranda, the maid suddenly felt dizzy. Her vision blurred, and before she could steady herself, she fell to the floor. The sound of the broom hitting the tiles echoed through the hall. The little girl came running, crying out, "Auntie! Auntie!" The master rushed from his study. For a moment his heart stopped. The sight of her lying unconscious, pale and still, tore something inside him. He quickly lifted her and shouted for help. The same man who once yelled at her with anger now trembled with fear. Hours later, in a nearby clinic, the doctor came out shaking his head slightly. "She's just exhausted," he said. "Too much work, not enough food or rest. Her body is weak, but she'll recover with care." The master looked down, guilt washing over his face. He sat beside her hospital bed as she slowly opened her eyes. Her voice was faint, barely a whisper. "Sir, did I do something wrong again?" He felt a sharp pain in his chest. "No," he said softly, holding her hand. "You did nothing wrong." "I did. I never saw your pain. I only saw the work." "I'm sorry." Tears slipped from her eyes. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "You don't know how long I waited to hear that." The little girl, standing by the bed, gently placed a small flower she had picked outside into the maid's hand. "Now you get better, Auntie. We'll eat together when you come home." The maid smiled weakly, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You already made me better, my child." Weeks passed. The maid recovered slowly, and when she returned to the house, things were not the same. Her employer greeted her with a kind smile. There was no shouting, no fear, only quiet respect. One evening the maid sat on the porch, watching the sunset with the little girl by her side. The golden light touched her face, and she whispered, "Sometimes God breaks us not to destroy us, but to remind others how to love." The little girl leaned against her shoulder and said softly, "Auntie, you're family now." The maid closed her eyes, a single tear falling down, but this time it was a tear of peace. The same home that once echoed with anger now glowed with compassion. Because sometimes the people we hurt the most are the ones who teach us what kindness truly means. And please watch this video till the end. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Kindness. We hope you felt this story deeply, because kindness doesn't just change others. It heals us too.